The shotgun blast ripped through the saloon doors, startling Eleanor Jameson from her quiet corner table and announcing a new chapter in her life, as surely as if fate itself had pulled the trigger. It wasn't the first time violence had erupted in Angels Camp, California, in the spring of 1878, but it was the first time the aftermath would leave her face to face with the tall, dust-covered stranger who would soon make her question everything she thought she knew about her own heart. "Somebody fetch the doctor," a voice shouted as the stranger staggered in, supporting a younger man whose shirt was soaked with blood. Eleanor found herself moving before she could think, her medical bag already in hand as she crossed the suddenly silent room. "I'm not a doctor, but I've training," she said firmly, her 24 years of life having taught her that confidence was often the only currency a woman had in such situations. "Put him on that table." The tall man's eyes met hers deep green beneath the shadow of his hat, and something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement. He nodded once and helped his friend onto the table. "Ezra Caldwell," he said simply as she began cutting away the wounded man's shirt. "And much obliged, miss." "Jameson, Sophia Jameson." Her fingers worked methodically, revealing a nasty bullet wound in the young man's shoulder. "Your friend is lucky, the bullet passed through clean." The wounded man groaned, his eyes fluttering. "Lucky ain't the word I'd use, miss, and you are." She asked, pouring whiskey over the wound, causing him to hiss through clenched teeth. "Samuel Wright. Pardon my manners." Sophia worked in silence for several minutes, cleaning and binding the wound with an efficiency that came from years of assisting her father, the town's former doctor. Ezra watched her hands move with surprising grace, noting the concentration in her eyes, the slight furrow between her brows. "You've done this before," he observed. "My father was the doctor here until last winter." She didn't elaborate, and something in her tone suggested it wasn't a topic for discussion. The saloon slowly returned to its normal activity around them, though many eyes remained fixed on the newcomers. Angels Camp had seen its share of trouble since the gold rush days, but strangers always brought fresh interest. "What brings you to Angels Camp?" she asked as she finished securing the bandage. "Business," Ezra replied, his expression revealing nothing. "Though now it seems we'll be staying longer than planned." "He needs rest, clean water, and no riding for at least a week," Sophia instructed, packing her supplies. "A week?" Samuel protested, trying to sit up before wincing and falling back. "We don't have a week, Ezra." "We do now," Ezra said firmly, his hand on his friend's good shoulder. "Miss Jameson's right. You ride with that wound and you'll be dead before we reach the foothills." Sophia wiped her hands on a clean cloth. "There's a boarding house 3 doors down, Mrs. Winters is fair with her prices and discreet with her questions." "Much obliged," Ezra said again, his eyes lingering on her face a moment longer than necessary. "I don't suppose you'd allow me to buy you dinner as thanks?" The question caught her off guard. It had been over a year since any man had asked such a thing, and longer still since she'd considered accepting. After her father's death and the scandal that followed, most of the town had kept their distance. "That's not necessary, Mr. Caldwell." "Necessary, no. But I'd consider it an honor all the same." There was something in his voice, not the practiced charm of a saloon sweet talker, but something more genuine. "Perhaps another time," she replied, gathering her medical bag. "I should check on your friend tomorrow to ensure there's no infection." Ezra nodded, tipping his hat slightly. "We'll be at Mrs. Winters, then." As she left the saloon, Sophia could feel the weight of his gaze following her, and something unfamiliar stirred in her chest, something she had thought long buried beneath responsibility and grief. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the Sierra Nevada mountains visible in the distance, still capped with the last of winter's snow. Sophia completed her morning routine with more care than usual, though she told herself it was merely professional pride that had her selecting her best blue dress rather than her everyday brown, Mrs. Winter's boarding house sat on the edge of Angels Camp's Main Street, a tidy two-story building with white shutters and a small garden that was just beginning to bloom. The proprietress greeted Sophia with a knowing smile. "Your patients are in the back room, dear." The younger one's been feverish since dawn. Concern quickened Sophia's steps as she made her way through the house. She found Samuel lying on a narrow bed, his face flushed with fever, while Ezra sat in a chair beside him, his expression grim. "When did the fever start?" she asked without preamble, setting down her bag and moving to examine Samuel. "Around midnight," Ezra replied, standing to give her room. "He was restless, talking nonsense by morning." Sophia carefully removed the bandage, revealing angry red flesh around the wound. "Infection," she confirmed. "I need to clean this again, and I have medicines that might help, but, Ezra prompted when she hesitated. "But I need supplies from my home, things my father kept." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. Things that some in town might consider unusual, native remedies. Understanding dawned in Ezra's eyes. "Your father learned from the local tribes. Yes, it caused difficulties for him, for us." She didn't elaborate on how the town doctor's reputation had suffered when he began incorporating indigenous healing practices alongside his formal medical training. Or how, after his death, those same townspeople who had whispered behind his back had refused to allow Sophia to continue his practice officially. "I'll come with you," Ezra said, reaching for his hat. "That's not necessary. Your patient is my friend," he interrupted gently. "And if these remedies might help him, I'd like to assist however I can." Something in his tone, the lack of judgment, the simple acceptance made her nod in agreement. Very well. They walked in silence through the awakening town, morning light gilding the false-fronted buildings and casting long shadows across the rutted street. A few early risers nodded cautiously to Sophia, their eyes lingering curiously on the tall stranger at her side. Her home sat on the outskirts of town, a modest cabin with an adjoining structure that had once served as her father's clinic. The garden surrounding it was already showing signs of life, herbs and medicinal plants carefully tended. "You live alone?" Ezra asked as she unlocked the door. "Since my father passed," she replied, leading him inside. "Most of his patients now see Dr. Barton in Columbia when they can make the journey, or they come to me secretly when they can't." The cabin was neat but filled with books, dried plants hanging from the ceiling beams, and shelves of labeled bottles and jars. Ezra moved to the bookcase, running his fingers along the spines of medical texts interspersed with journals and what appeared to be handwritten notes. "Your father's work," Sophia nodded, selecting jars from a cabinet. "His life's work, combining what he learned in medical school with what the Miwok people taught him. And you learned both as well." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes. Though the medical school in San Francisco wouldn't consider my application." She kept her voice neutral, though the rejection letter had been a crushing blow. "Women can be nurses, not doctors," they said. "Their loss," Ezra remarked, watching as she efficiently gathered supplies. "And angels' camp's gain, I'd say." She paused, surprised by his words. "Most here don't see it that way. Most people fear what they don't understand." He moved closer, taking the basket she'd been filling. "My mother was Cherokee. She used plants to heal that most white doctors would scoff at. But they worked all the same." The simple statement, offered without pretense, made Sophia look at him with new eyes. In the morning light streaming through the windows, she could see the high cheekbones, the sun-darkened skin that spoke of mixed heritage features that would mark him as an outsider in many places, just as her father's practices had gradually marked their family. "And what do you do, Mr. Caldwell, besides escort wounded friends into saloons?" A smile touched his lips. "I raise horses, or I did. The ranch in Colorado didn't exactly prosper." He hefted the basket. "Now I'm escorting Samuel to his uncle's place near Sacramento, or I was, until yesterday's." "Complication. What happened? If you don't mind my asking." "Disagreement with some former associates," he said, his expression darkening slightly. "Samuel took a bullet meant for me. Then you're fortunate to have such a loyal friend. I am. He held her gaze steadily. Loyalty's a rare quality these days. Something in his tone made her wonder what betrayals he had endured, but she didn't press. Everyone in the West carried their own stories, their own scars. She'd learned long ago not to pry unless invited. "We should return," she said instead, moving toward the door. "Samuel needs these medicines as soon as possible." They walked back to the boarding house, the town now fully awake around them. Sophia was aware of the curious glances, the whispers that followed them. Angel's camp was small enough that a woman walking with an unknown man, particularly one with Ezra's distinctive appearance, would fuel gossip for days. Back in Samuel's room, Sophia worked efficiently, cleaning the wound again and applying a poultice of herbs ground to a paste. She explained each step to Ezra, who watched with intelligent interest, asking questions that revealed a practical mind and previous experience with treating injuries. "The fever should break by evening if this works," she said, finishing the bandaging. "I'll leave these herbs with you. Mix them with hot water for him to drink every few hours. You're not staying." There was genuine disappointment in his voice. "I have other patients to see," she explained, "but I'll return this evening." True to her word, Sophia returned after sunset, carrying her medical bag and a covered dish. She found Ezra sitting beside Samuel's bed, reading one of the dime novels that were popular throughout the West. "His fever broke an hour ago," Ezra announced as she entered, rising to his feet. "He's been sleeping peacefully since." Relief washed over Sophia as she checked Samuel's forehead, finding it cool and dry. "That's excellent news. The worst danger has passed. Thanks to you." Ezra's voice was warm with gratitude. "I brought stew," she said, setting down the dish. "I thought you might be hungry." His smile was unexpected and transformative, softening the hard lines of his face. "That's mighty kind. I am at that." They shared the simple meal at the small table in the corner of the room, speaking in low voices to avoid disturbing Samuel. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself sharing stories of her father, of growing up as the daughter of a doctor who challenged conventional wisdom. "He sounds like a remarkable man," Ezra commented, "to have the courage to learn from those most would dismiss." "He was," she agreed, her throat tightening with sudden emotion. "When the influenza came through last winter, he worked day and night, but in the end, he couldn't save himself." She stared into her bowl. Some in town said it was divine punishment for his heathen practices. As if God would strike down a man for trying to save lives using all knowledge available to him. Ezra's hand moved across the table, covering hers briefly. "People fear what threatens their understanding of the world. Your father challenged that understanding." "As do you, I imagine," she observed, studying his face in the lamplight. "Being neither fully white nor Indian tends to make a man question many things others take as given," he acknowledged with a slight shrug. "Though I've learned when to speak those questions aloud and when to keep them to myself." "A wisdom I'm still acquiring," Sophia admitted with a small smile. "There's wisdom in honesty too," Ezra countered. "Your father taught you that, I'd wager." Their conversation continued into the night, moving from philosophy to more practical matters. The horse ranch Ezra had lost in a drought. Samuel's uncle, who owned a successful freight business in Sacramento. Sophia's garden and the remedies she created for those who still sought her help, despite the town's disapproval. It was past midnight when Sophia finally rose to leave, surprised at how quickly the hours had passed. "I should go, and you should rest." "I'll walk you home," Ezra said, reaching for his hat. "That's not necessary. Angel's camp is perfectly safe, nonetheless." His tone brooked no argument, and Sophia found herself oddly touched by the gesture. The night was clear and cool as they walked through the sleeping town, the moon casting silver light across the dusty street. Their footsteps echoed in the silence, and Sophia was acutely aware of Ezra's tall presence beside her, of the comfortable rhythm they'd fallen into. At her door, she turned to face him. "Thank you for escorting me, though it truly wasn't necessary." "It was my pleasure," he replied, his voice low in the darkness. "And my privilege." There was a moment brief but electric when something seemed to pass between them, a current of possibility that made Sophia's breath catch. Then Ezra stepped back, tipping his hat. "Good night, Miss Jameson." "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." She watched him walk away, his silhouette gradually fading into the night before she entered her empty home. For the first time in months, the silence felt somehow heavier than before. Over the next days, Sophia visited Samuel regularly, watching his recovery with professional satisfaction. Ezra was always present, and their conversations continued to deepen, revealing shared interests and compatible perspectives despite their different backgrounds. On the fourth day, Samuel was well enough to sit up and join their conversations, his youthful enthusiasm and quick wit adding a new dimension to their interactions. It became clear that he viewed Ezra as an older brother figure, and the affection between them was evident in their good-natured ribbing. "You should have seen him when we first met," Samuel told Sophia as they shared an evening meal at the boarding house. "Sullen as a wet cat and twice as likely to claw you." Ezra shook his head with mock severity. "I believe the phrase I used was 'get off my property before I shoot you,' which seems reasonable when finding a 16-year-old trying to steal one of my horses." "I wasn't stealing," Samuel protested. "I was borrowing with unclear intent to return." Sophia laughed, enjoying their camaraderie. "And yet here you are, years later, still together." "He gave me a job instead of a bullet," Samuel said, his tone turning more serious. "Not many would have done that." "You worked hard and earned your keep," Ezra replied simply. "That's all a man can ask." As Samuel's strength returned, Sophia found herself inventing reasons to continue her visits, reluctant to see the end of these evening gatherings that had become the highlight of her days. Ezra, too, seemed to find excuses to seek her out, asking about herbs for the horses he hoped to raise again someday, offering to repair the loose step on her porch, bringing fresh fish he'd caught in the nearby river. It was during one such visit, as they worked together in her garden, that Ezra finally asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between them. "Would you join me for dinner tomorrow night, not as patient and healer, but—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "As a woman and a man," Sophia supplied, her heart quickening. "Yes." His eyes met hers directly. "I find myself thinking of you when you're not present, Sophia, more than is probably wise." The admission, simple and honest, touched something deep within her. "I've been thinking of you as well," she confessed softly, "though I'm not sure what that means." "It means dinner tomorrow," he said with a smile. "The rest we'll figure out as we go." The next evening, Sophia dressed with care in her finest dress, a deep green that she'd rarely had occasion to wear since her father's funeral. She pinned her hair up, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face, and dabbed a hint of her precious rose water at her wrists and throat. Ezra arrived promptly, clean-shaven and wearing a crisp white shirt beneath his dark vest, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The appreciative look in his eyes as she opened the door sent warmth spreading through her chest. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you." "You clean up quite nicely yourself, Mr. Caldwell." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" He escorted her to the hotel restaurant, the finest establishment in Angel's Camp. Sophia was acutely aware of the stares and whispers as they entered, but Ezra's steady presence beside her gave her the courage to hold her head high. They were seated at a corner table, where a single candle cast a warm glow between them. "Everyone is staring," she murmured as they settled. "Let them," Ezra replied with a shrug. "I'm more interested in our conversation than their opinions." The meal was the most enjoyable Sophia had experienced in years. Ezra was attentive and engaging, asking about her hopes and dreams, sharing stories of his travels across the West. As the evening progressed, she found herself speaking of things she had told no one: her desire to someday complete medical training, her loneliness after her father's death, her frustration with the town's narrow-mindedness. "Sometimes I think of leaving," she admitted as they shared a slice of apple pie. Starting fresh somewhere new, where no one knows me as poor Dr. Jameson's eccentric daughter. What stops you? Ezra asked, his expression genuinely curious. She considered the question seriously. My father's legacy, I suppose, his books, his research, the patients who still need me, even if they must come in secret. She traced a pattern on the tablecloth with her finger. And fear, if I'm honest. The world is large and I am just one woman alone. You're far more than just anything, Sophia Jameson, Ezra said quietly. And the right place would recognize your worth. His words warmed her, but a lifetime of pragmatism made her smile ruefully. The right place may not exist, at least not for a woman who wishes to practice medicine without a husband's name to shield her. Then perhaps the answer lies not in the place, but in finding the right people to stand beside you, Ezra suggested, his eyes holding hers. The implication hung between them, tantalizing and frightening in its possibility. Before Sophia could formulate a response, they were interrupted by the restaurant owner, a portly man named Henderson. Evening, Miss Jameson, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Everything to your satisfaction. The meal was excellent, thank you, she replied, Henderson's eyes flicked to Ezra, assessing. Haven't seen you round these parts before, Mr. Ezra Caldwell, Ezra introduced himself calmly. Just passing through with my friend, the young man Miss Jameson so skillfully treated. Ah, yes. Henderson's expression tightened slightly. Well, we're always happy to serve travelers. The emphasis on the word suggested the opposite, that Ezra's welcome in Angel's camp was conditional and temporary. After Henderson moved away, Ezra's expression remained untroubled. I've received warmer welcomes in Apache camps, he remarked dryly. Sophia felt a flush of embarrassment. I'm sorry, the town can be provincial. It's not your apology to make, Ezra assured her, and I've grown accustomed to such receptions. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Though I find myself caring more about this particular town's opinion than I normally would. The admission sent a flutter through Sophia's chest. Because of Samuel's recovery, his smile was warm and knowing. You know that's not the reason. They left the restaurant shortly after, the cool night air a relief after the stifling atmosphere inside. Rather than returning directly to Sophia's home, they walked toward the edge of town, where the street gave way to a path leading up a gentle hill. By unspoken agreement, they followed it, eventually reaching a clearing that offered a view of Angel's camp below and the vast starry sky above. It's beautiful, Sophia said, gazing upward. It is, Ezra agreed, though when she turned, she found him looking at her rather than the stars. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Ezra took a step closer, his eyes searching hers for permission. Sophia felt herself trembling slightly, not from fear but from the intensity of emotions she had long suppressed. Sophia, he said softly, may I kiss you? The question, so formal and respectful, made her smile despite her nervousness. Yes, she whispered, his lips were gentle against hers, the kiss tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. His hand came up to cradle her face, his touch reverent. When they finally parted, Sophia felt breathless, her heart racing beneath her ribs. I've wanted to do that since the moment you took charge in that saloon, Ezra admitted, his voice husky. I'm glad you waited until now, she replied with a small laugh. It would have been rather scandalous otherwise. They stood together under the stars, talking softly as the night deepened around them. Ezra spoke of his hopes to start again, perhaps in Northern California, where land was cheaper and prejudices sometimes less entrenched. Sophia shared her dreams of combining her father's research with formal medical training, creating a practice that honored both traditions. As they finally turned to walk back to town, Ezra took her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. When will you and Samuel continue your journey? Sophia asked, the question that had been haunting her finally finding voice. He's well enough to travel in a day or two, Ezra answered honestly. His uncle is expecting us. The thought of his departure created a hollow feeling in Sophia's chest. Of course, you have obligations. Ezra stopped, turning to face her. I do, but I also find myself with a new consideration. His eyes held her steadily. I don't want to leave you, Sophia. The simple declaration stole her breath. Ezra, we've known each other less than 2 weeks, and in that time I've come to respect your intelligence, admire your courage, and care for your kind heart, he interrupted gently. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just telling you the truth of what I feel. Sophia found herself at a crossroads she had never anticipated. All her life had been planned, ordered, practical first as her father's assistant, then as his successor in all but official title. Emotions, especially those as volatile as what she was beginning to feel for Ezra, had no place in that ordered existence. I don't know what to say, she admitted. These feelings, they're unfamiliar to me. Have you never been courted before? Ezra asked, genuine curiosity in his tone. Once, briefly. The banker's son, before my father's practices became controversial. She smiled ruefully. It was more a business arrangement than a romance, and it ended when my father began treating patients the respectable doctor had given up on. His loss, Ezra said simply. And perhaps my gain. They reached her cabin, and Ezra escorted her to the door. This time, their goodnight kiss was less hesitant, a promise of feelings that were rapidly deepening between them. May I call on you tomorrow? He asked as they parted. Please do, she replied, surprising herself with the eagerness in her voice. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Sophia was tending her garden when she heard the approach of horses. Looking up, she saw 3 riders approaching her cabin, dust billowing behind them. As they drew closer, she recognized the lead rider as William Haywood, one of Angel's Camp's most prosperous citizens and a man who had made his distaste for her father's methods well known. Miss Jameson, Haywood called, reining in his horse. We need to speak with you. Sophia straightened, brushing dirt from her hands. What can I do for you, Mr. Haywood? It's about your visitor. The way he said the word left no doubt he meant Ezra. Word is he's part Indian. Mr. Caldwell has Cherokee ancestry, yes, Sophia confirmed, keeping her voice steady. What of it? Haywood exchanged glances with his companions. We've had trouble with his kind before, stealing, causing fights. The town council thinks it best if he moves on. Anger flared in Sophia's chest. Mr. Caldwell has done nothing wrong. He's been a perfect gentleman, and his friend was injured through no fault of their own. Be that as it may, Haywood continued, his tone patronizing, we're concerned about your reputation being seen with such a man. Your father left you in a precarious position as it is. My reputation is my own concern, Sophia replied coldly, and I would thank you to leave my father out of this. We're trying to help you, girl, one of the other men interjected. That breed is just passing through. Once he gets what he wants, he'll move on and leave you ruined. The crude implication made Sophia's cheeks burn with anger. I believe this conversation is over, gentlemen. Good day. She turned to enter her home, but Haywood's next words stopped her. The council's decided, Miss Jameson. Either your friend leaves by tomorrow, or we'll have to reconsider whether Angel's Camp needs your unique services at all. The threat was clear. If Ezra stayed, the town would ensure even her secret practice would be impossible to maintain. She would lose her home, her livelihood, and what remained of her father's work. You have no right, she began, but Haywood cut her off. We have every right to protect this town, he stated firmly. Make sure he understands the situation. With that, the 3 men wheeled their horses and rode away, leaving Sophia trembling with fury and fear. She had always known the precariousness of her position in Angel's Camp, but never had it been so blatantly used against her. When Ezra arrived later that afternoon, she met him on the porch, her expression grave. His smile faded as he saw her face. What's happened? She told him about the visit, watching as his expression hardened with each word. By the time she finished, his jaw was set in a tight line, his eyes cold. So I'm to leave or they'll drive you out, he summarized flatly. Essentially, yes. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself. "I'm so sorry, Ezra, this isn't right." "It's a familiar story," he said with resignation, though usually they don't bother with the courtesy of a warning. "What will you do?" she asked, dreading his answer. Ezra was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Samuel is well enough to travel. We could leave in the morning." Despite knowing it was the inevitable answer, Sophia felt her heart sink. "I understand." His eyes returned to her face, studying her expression. "Do you? Because I'm not sure I do." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm trying to understand why a woman of your intelligence and courage would remain in a town that so clearly doesn't value her." There was no accusation in his tone, only genuine puzzlement. The question struck Sophia like a physical blow. She had asked herself the same thing countless times over the past year and had always found reasons to stay her father's legacy, her patience, the comfort of familiarity despite its flaws. "It's my home," she said simply, "for all its faults." "A home should nurture you, not diminish you," Ezra replied quietly. "Your father's work can travel wherever you go. Your skills would be valued in 100 places I could name." "Are you suggesting I leave?" The possibility both terrified and exhilarated her. "I'm suggesting you consider whether staying serves your future or only preserves your past." Ezra took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "And yes, I'm suggesting you might come with us, at least as far as Sacramento. See something beyond Angel's Camp before you decide where you belong." The offer hung in the air between them, breathtaking in its simplicity and its implications. To leave the only home she had ever known, to travel with a man she had known for less than 2 weeks, to step into an uncertain future, it was madness by any rational measure. "I can't just leave," she protested weakly. "Why not?" Ezra challenged gently. "What truly holds you here besides fear and obligation to the dead?" The bluntness of the question made her flinch, but Sophia recognized its truth. Her father would never have wanted her to diminish herself out of loyalty to his memory. He had always encouraged her independence, her growth, her dreams beyond the confines of Angel's Camp. "I would need time," she said finally, "to decide what to take, what to leave behind." Hope kindled in Ezra's eyes. "We could wait a day or two." "No," Sophia said firmly. "If you stay, they'll find a way to make trouble for you, for all of us." She took a deep breath. "If I'm to do this, it must be tomorrow, as they demanded, only I'll be leaving with you." The decision, once made, filled her with a strange calm. That evening, as Ezra returned to the boarding house to prepare Samuel for their new traveling companion, Sophia moved through her home with purpose, selecting the books and journals most precious to her father's research, the herbs and remedies that couldn't be easily replaced, the few keepsakes that held sentimental value. By dawn, she had packed 2 trunks and a satchel with the essentials of her life. She had written letters to her few friends in town, explaining her decision without apology or regret. And she had spent hours in the small graveyard at the edge of town, saying goodbye to her father and making peace with her choice. When Ezra arrived with Samuel and a wagon borrowed from Mrs. Winters, Sophia was ready, her face composed though her heart raced with nervous excitement. "Are you certain?" Ezra asked one last time as he loaded her trunks. Sophia looked back at the cabin that had been her home for all her 24 years, feeling a pang of loss but also a surge of anticipation. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm certain." They left Angel's Camp as the town was just beginning to stir, the wagon rolling quietly down the main street and turning onto the road that would take them west toward Sacramento. As the town receded behind them, Sophia felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since before her father's illness. Samuel, still moving carefully but clearly recovering well, chattered excitedly about his uncle's business, the opportunities that might await them all in Sacramento, the adventures they would have along the way. His youthful enthusiasm was infectious, making even the uncertainty of their journey seem like an exciting prospect rather than a daunting challenge. They made camp that evening by a stream, the Sierra Nevada foothills rising around them. As Samuel slept, Ezra and Sophia sat by the fire talking in low voices. "Having regrets?" he asked, watching her face in the flickering light. "No," she answered truthfully. "Though I am having moments of thinking I've lost my mind." Ezra laughed softly. "The most important decisions often feel that way." "And what about you?" Sophia turned to face him fully. "You've acquired an unexpected companion on your journey. Any regrets there?" "Only that I didn't meet you years ago," he replied, his eyes sincere. "Though perhaps we wouldn't have appreciated each other then as we do now." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the flames dance before them. Eventually, Sophia voiced the question that had been growing in her mind throughout the day. "What happens when we reach Sacramento?" After Samuel joins his uncle, Ezra considered before answering. "That depends on what you want, Sophia. I have some savings, enough to start over. I've been thinking about land near the Russian River where the soil is good for raising horses." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I'd be honored if you would consider joining me there, building something new together." "As your wife?" The directness of her question surprised even herself. "Eventually, yes, if that's what you want too." His honesty was refreshing in its simplicity, but I'm not asking for that commitment now. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to see where this path leads us." Sophia looked into the fire, considering his words. All her life had been planned, ordered according to others' expectations. This new journey was uncharted, with no guarantees except the character of the man beside her and the strength she was discovering within herself. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted softly. "I don't know how to build a life around feelings, around love." Ezra's hand found hers in the darkness. "Then let me teach you," he said gently. "And perhaps you can teach me as well. I've been alone a long time, Sophia. Learning to share a life would be new for both of us." His words, so simple and yet so profound, touched something deep within her. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully consider the possibility of a future with this man, not as an escape from her past, but as a choice toward something new and potentially beautiful. "I would like that," she whispered, leaning against his shoulder. They reached Sacramento 3 days later, the growing city a stark contrast to the small mining town Sophia had left behind. Samuel's uncle, a prosperous businessman named Robert Wright, welcomed them warmly, offering hospitality until they could establish their own arrangements. "Any friend of Samuel's is welcome in my home," he declared, showing them to comfortable guest rooms in his large house on the outskirts of the city. "And a lady doctor. My wife will be delighted. She's been complaining about the local physician for years." Over the next weeks, Sophia found herself busy helping in Robert's household, treating minor ailments among the staff and family, and exploring the city with Ezra. They visited medical suppliers, where Sophia could replenish her stocks and discover new treatments. They consulted with land agents about properties to the north, where Ezra hoped to establish his horse ranch. And gradually, their relationship deepened, moving beyond the intense initial attraction into something more substantial, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared dreams, and growing affection. It was during one such excursion, as they picnicked beside the American River, that Ezra first spoke the words that had been hovering unspoken between them. "I love you, Sophia," he said simply, his eyes holding hers. "I didn't expect to find you, and I certainly didn't plan to feel this way. But I do." The words she had feared all her life, words that represented vulnerability, uncertainty, risk, now filled her with unexpected joy. "I love you too," she replied, the admission easier than she had imagined, "though I'm still learning what that means." Ezra smiled, reaching to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "We'll learn together." 2 months after leaving Angel's camp, they stood together on a hillside overlooking a verdant valley near the Russian River. The land before them, 100 acres with a small existing cabin, a barn, and good water, represented their future if they chose to claim it. "It needs work," Ezra acknowledged, "but the bones are good." Room for horses in the valley, crops on the south slope, maybe even a proper clinic someday. Sophia surveyed the land, imagining the possibilities. A home of their choosing, a practice where she could combine her father's wisdom with her own growing knowledge, a community they would build based on respect rather than fear or prejudice. It's perfect, she decided, squeezing Ezra's hand. They were married the following week in Sacramento, with Samuel and his uncle's family as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, but meaningful in its sincerity. Sophia wore a new dress of deep blue silk, a gift from Robert's wife, and carried wildflowers gathered that morning from the riverbank. As Ezra placed a simple gold band on her finger, Sophia thought of how far she had come from that day in the Angels' Camp saloon. From a woman living half a life, constrained by others' expectations and her own fears, to a woman choosing her own path with a partner who valued her strength as well as her softness. "I promise to walk beside you, not ahead or behind," Ezra said in his vows, his voice steady and sure. "To build with you a home where both our traditions are honored, where healing and growth can flourish, and to love you through all the seasons of our life together." "I promise to trust this journey we've begun," Sophia replied, her voice clear despite the tears that threatened. "To bring all that I am to our partnership, my knowledge, my heart, my dreams, and to love you with the courage you've taught me to claim." Their first months on the new land were filled with hard work, repairing the cabin, preparing fields for planting, building corrals for the horses Ezra began to acquire. Sophia established a small clinic in one room of their home, gradually gaining the trust of neighboring families who appreciated her practical approach and genuine care. Word spread about the doctor who combined traditional medicine with native remedies, and about her husband who raised horses that were both beautiful and sound. They weren't wealthy, but they were respected, and their home became a place of healing in more ways than one. A year after their wedding, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the valley in gold, Sophia took Ezra's hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "I have news," she said softly. His eyes widened, hope and joy dawning in their green depths. "A child." Sophia nodded, her heart full with the wonder of it. "Due in the winter if my calculations are correct." Ezra gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle but fierce. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair. "For what?" she asked, smiling against his chest. "For trusting me enough to leave Angels' Camp. For teaching me that home isn't a place but the people we love." He pulled back to look into her eyes. "For showing me that new beginnings are possible even when the past has taught us to expect less." Their son, James Daniel Caldwell, was born on a clear December morning, with a local midwife assisting while Ezra paced anxiously outside. When Sophia placed the tiny bundle in his arms, she saw tears in his eyes as he gazed down at the infant's face, a perfect blend of their features, with Sophia's dark curls and Ezra's green eyes. "He's beautiful," Ezra whispered, touching a gentle finger to the baby's cheek. "He is," Sophia agreed, watching the two most important people in her world with a heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "And he's ours." As James grew, so did their homestead. Ezra's reputation as a horse breeder spread, bringing clients from as far as San Francisco. Sophia's medical practice expanded, eventually requiring a separate building where she could treat patients and train two young women who showed promise and interest in healing. 3 years after James's birth, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Rose, her arrival coinciding with the completion of their new, larger home. Samuel, who had become a successful partner in his uncle's business, traveled north for the celebration, bringing gifts and news from Sacramento. "I'm thinking of branching out," he told them as they shared dinner on the wide porch of their new home. "Starting my own freight line, maybe up toward Oregon. You always were ambitious," Ezra remarked with affectionate pride. "I had good teachers," Samuel replied, nodding to both of them. "You taught me about second chances, and Sophia showed me that courage sometimes means leaving the familiar for the unknown." Life wasn't always easy. There were difficult years when drought threatened the crops and horses, when illness swept through the region testing Sophia's skills and endurance, when prejudice occasionally raised its ugly head against their mixed heritage family. But through it all, they faced challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. 10 years after leaving Angel's Camp, Sophia received a letter from Mrs. Winters, the boarding house proprietress who had kept an occasional touch. The town had changed, she wrote. The old council members, including Haywood, had been voted out after a series of scandals. A new doctor had arrived, a young man trained in San Francisco who expressed interest in Sophia's father's research and methods. He asked if you might consider corresponding about your experiences, Mrs. Winters wrote, "The town misses you, though many would be too proud to admit it." Sitting in her garden, surrounded by the herbs and flowers she had transplanted from her father's original beds, and supplemented with new varieties discovered over the years, Sophia considered the request. The anger and hurt she had once felt toward Angel's Camp had long since faded, replaced by gratitude for the path that had led her here. That evening, she shared the letter with Ezra as they sat by the fire, their children already asleep upstairs. "Will you write to him?" Ezra asked, his hand absently stroking her hair. "I think I will," Sophia decided. Father would have wanted his work to continue regardless of past hurts. Ezra nodded, understanding as always. Perhaps someday we might even visit, show the children where their journey began in a way. The thought, once unimaginable, now seemed possible. "Perhaps," she agreed, "though this is their home and ours." "It is," Ezra confirmed, pulling her closer against his side, "the best home I could have imagined." As they sat together in the warmth of their home, Sophia reflected on the strange and wonderful path that had brought them here. From a chance meeting in a saloon to this life, they had built together a family, a thriving practice, a community that valued them for who they were rather than who others thought they should be. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. Taking a chance on a woman who admitted she didn't know how to love. Ezra turned to her, his face lined now with a decade of sun and laughter, but his eyes still holding the same warmth that had first drawn her to him. "Never," he said firmly. "Best decision I ever made. Even better than buying that stallion from San Francisco that everyone said was too wild to train," she teased, referring to a famous triumph in his breeding program. "Even better than that," he confirmed with a smile, "though it was a close call." Sophia laughed, leaning up to kiss him. After all these years, she still felt that same flutter in her chest when his lips met hers, that same sense of coming home. "Thank you," she whispered against his mouth. "For what?" "For teaching me how to love, and for loving me while I learned." Ezra's arms tightened around her. "The pleasure was mine, Mrs. Caldwell, and the honor, and the joy." Outside their window, the stars shone over the valley they had made their own a place of healing, of growth, of love freely given and gratefully received. It was everything Sophia had never dared to dream of in Angel's Camp, and everything she now couldn't imagine living without. In the quiet of their home, with the future stretching bright before them, Sophia Jameson Caldwell knew with absolute certainty that love, once learned, was a lesson that never ended and that the teaching and learning of it was the greatest adventure of all.